Okay, so thank you guys for joining. There's Caitlin. Hi, Caitlin. So today is the day that I've just been waiting for the whole semester when we get to do our workshop on bats. Very exciting. And the workshop is, I think, more straightforward than last time. I'm not going to do anything else with Excel sheets. I am going to do that next year. But this year, with some people not having access to Google Chrome, to Excel is just too hard for everybody. So this workshop is more straightforward. It involves some difficult thinking, but no math or modeling. So let me share my screen because I made a little presentation for you to kind of give you some background on the workshop. And so let me just go ahead and walk you guys through that. Okay, so this workshop today is going to be about bats in Madagascar, and this I like it's not, I didn't just pick this workshop because it was based on bats. I took a different workshop and modified it to be on bats because I am interested in them. But the point of the workshop is that you've been working throughout the semester on learning different pieces of things that need to be considered to protect biodiversity, right? Like basic things like what's the species richness or diversity, and how are we going to get all the invasives out of here so that all the species can survive? And if we convert land, what kind of impact is that going to have on species? But in this workshop, I'm asking you to kind of consider all of those things. So protecting multiple species, figuring out what parts of the landscape are important for multiple species, and balancing out things like which species are endemic and which species are not very common and which species might be threatened by forest clearing. And so you're given that information in the workshop. It's just a couple maps and a table. But what I'm asking you to do is like synthesize those things you've learned so far in class to kind of say, okay, when you actually have to make a conservation decision, you have to weigh a whole bunch of different competing priorities, right? So that's what you're going to do today. But you have to know a little bit of this background so to understand the workshop. So it's bats in Madagascar. Now, has anybody been to Madagascar? I'd be really surprised if anybody has. I haven't, but it's a place I'd love to go. So it's this, I'm actually going to play the really short video for you here in a second. It's a biodiversity hotspot. A lot of islands have a high biodiversity because they're isolated, and so different species evolve there. But you can see on this graph here, this is surface area, and this is the number of bat species. And so the more species you have in the smaller surface area, the more diversity you have per unit area, right? And so you can see that like Borneo is super high up there in Papua New Guinea, but Madagascar is way up out of this cluster of where most places are. And then out here we have places like the US where you have really big places with not as many bat species. So I have this video I want to share with you because it's just much more fun way to look at. It's 1 minute, so okay, so let me show you that now. Internet, oh, here it is. Okay, so can you guys see this video? Okay, so this will tell you why Madagascar is cool in a couple minutes.
Madagascar is not just a hotspot, it's the hottest of hotspots. Madagascar is special because of its geological and its geographic. Madagascar is separated from Africa by
Okay, so I love that video. It shows everything that I want. Oh, the audio's spotty for you guys? Raise your hand if the audio's spotty for you. Is it spotty when I'm talking or just the video?
Just the video.
Okay, then that video's on Moodle. We have another video playing. That video is on Moodle, so you guys can watch it on Moodle. Like you saw, it's like 1.5 minutes long, and it just gives you a really good context. So I won't play the other video I was going to play later, which is also about 2 minutes. You guys can watch that. There's 2 video links posted on Moodle. So you can watch those yourself. But they give basically that last video, in case you missed the majority of the audio, what he's just saying with those nice graphics is that Madagascar is a really unique spot because it's been separated from Africa for 120 million years. And so there's been a lot of time for the species in Madagascar to like follow a different evolutionary path. And as a result, they have high levels of endemism. So that's an important word for the workshop, endemic. Do you guys remember what that means? Does anyone know? Anyone know? Endemic means it only occurs in that one spot. So, for example, like the Norwegian rat is not endemic to anywhere. That's like the regular rat you'd find in hopefully nowhere. But if you've ever seen a rat in a building, I'm sorry, but that's a Norwegian rat. So they're not endemic to anywhere. They're native to Norway, but they're spread all over the whole world. But many of the bats that you'll see in this workshop today are endemic to Madagascar. They evolved there. They never spread anywhere else. So you might consider that as a conservation priority, right? Because if you lose them there, you lose them everywhere. So that's what endemic means. So let me share my screen again to show you a couple more things about bats in Madagascar. So yes, they're very diverse. Let's go through some basic ecology because this will help you decide how to protect them. So where do bats live? Not just in Madagascar, but everywhere. They live, we call them roosts where they live. Bats don't just roost in caves. They also roost in like outdoor rock crevices that aren't in a cave, right? They roost in buildings and human structures, which you may have experienced somewhere where you live, having bats in the attic or something. And a lot of bats roost in trees and vegetation, especially in the tropics. So up here in New York, we have 3 bat species that roost like in the bark of trees. We don't have any bats that roost just inside leaves, but in the tropics, including Madagascar, there's a lot of bats that will just roost in hanging off branches of trees, hanging off leaves. So that makes that an important thing to protect if you're going to protect their roosts. So when you picture a bat, you probably picture them flying around through the air, right, hunting for insects. But bats actually spend most of their lives in their roosts. They spend, besides foraging time, they spend time in a day roost where they'll like go get something and then come back to eat it. Excuse me, that's the night roost. In the day roost, they're sleeping, right? But they're in social groups. They have their young. They're feeding and taking care of their young. That's what they do in the day roosts. So they're in the roost most of the time. So variations in use, okay, like I just said, there's day roosts and night roosts, and I just made that mistake, but remember, the day roost would be where they sleep, right? And the night roosts are where they're like going out, getting some food, and coming back to a close place to eat it and be protected from predators. And their predators are mainly just owls, right? Because there's not that many flying things that hunt at night. So owls are big predators of bats. Okay, so if you're going to protect bats, it's important to protect their roosts because that's where they spend most of their time. That's their home base, right? Okay, what do bats eat in Madagascar? Well, we know what do they eat in the US? What do they eat in the northern US where we live? I know you guys know this, so I'm literally just gonna be quiet till you tell me. Just someone unmute themselves and tell me.
Is it just fruit?
No, it's well, so they do eat fruit in the tropics, but
Oh.
here they eat only insects.
Oh.
Yeah, so bats in northern parts of the world actually only eat insects. We don't have the other feeding guilds, but in the tropics, many different feeding guilds have emerged. And feeding guild just means like, what does this group specialize on? So like a carnivore would be a feeding guild. They eat meat, right? So in the tropics, there's all kinds of bats, and I don't know if our faces are blocking these pictures for you, but there's bats that eat fish. That's this picture up here. It's a fishing bat. It just caught a fish there in its foot. Those are really cool to watch. There's bats that eat insects as well. That's one of these guys down here, this really pretty red bat. There's many, many species of bats in the tropics that eat fruit, including these big flying foxes, the beautiful ones that everyone thinks are cute. And also many other bats that aren't quite as charismatic, but also eat fruit. Extra bonus points, does anyone have any idea what this little bat is eating?
Is this like what the other video was about? The bean?
Did you watch that video already?
Yeah.
So what is it?
Isn't it a coffee bean?
Yeah.
Or yeah.
It's a coffee bean. So so Rachel already watched that second video that's like 3 or 4 minutes long, talking about something that we'll talk about in a couple minutes, but bats that eat coffee aren't like caffeinivorous bats. They're frugivorous bats. It's a fruit, right? That's what a ripe coffee berry looks like. So what ecosystem services do bats provide? Biodiversity, we know that's an ecosystem service, right? Pollination and seed dispersal. Not as much for cash crops, but for like native plants. So they're important. That's a way that they maintain biodiversity. Insect pest control, that's important for agriculture, right? The bats in the north, bats in our region who eat insects, it's estimated that they consume like 3 times their weight in insects in a night. So think of the pest control service that they're providing for agriculture. And if you've ever trapped a bat in a mist net, you will understand why that statistic makes sense, because they poop like every 20 seconds. So they just have very, very fast metabolisms. So that's why they're able to eat so much in a night. And they're consuming all those insects that would otherwise be detrimental to agriculture. Guano production. Guano is bat poop, and bat poop is used as fertilizer. And seriously, and this is what these bags are up here, these hemp bags filled with brown stuff, that's bat poop, guano. It's a very expensive fertilizer. In some places it can be sold at really high prices. I didn't get a price estimate because it varies per location, but it's expensive enough that people will collect that as their livelihood and sell it to farmers. And then this really weird ecosystem service that bats provide only in Madagascar, which is bat spit coffee. And I had heard about this before, but I never like figured out what it was. So what this guy here is showing us is, so apparently you'll see if you watch that video, the second video, there's a kind of coffee so the coffee beans, when they're on the bush, when they get ripe, frugivorous bats that eat fruit will come and chew on the bean, because if you've ever chewed a coffee bean, it has a fruit, right, as well as the seed, which is the coffee bean, and the fruit tastes good, sweet. So they'll eat that and then spit out the seed. And I don't know how they figured this out, but I guess the beans that have been chewed on by bats produce like a really exceptionally delicious coffee. So now they'll tell the workers will go out into the fields and only pick up beans that have been like chewed on by bats. And this coffee, believe it or not, sells for $110 a pound in the United States and Europe. So if you get your tax refund back or something, or treat yourself to some bat spit coffee. So I'm laughing because it sounds crazy, but that's obviously a really strong ecosystem service, right? They're helping them produce a really expensive product that they can sell and make a profit. Okay, so what are the threats to bats? People eat bats in a lot of parts of Africa and Southeast Asia. Now, you might be thinking, like, why would you eat a bat? It's so small. Well, the large fruit bats in those regions aren't small. This picture is a little dark, but like the bats, some of the bats, their wingspans are like 4 feet. So if you kill an animal that size, it's kind of like, it's like a chihuahua, I guess. If you've ever had like a nice chihuahua for dinner, it's that size. Like if you imagine the meat on a chihuahua, that's like about how much meat you get off a giant fruit bat. But this is actually a threat to them because so hunting is legal and it's not monitored. Like we talked a lot in class about how hunting can be totally sustainable if it's monitored and people are given quotas of how many animals they can kill, but it's not monitored there. It's just legal to kill them. They're also sometimes hunted for sport or traditional medicines. And then as I pointed out here, like if people hunted outside of the bat roosts, that could be fine. But they mostly hunt at roost sites and then they're just killing a ton of bats at the same time and sometimes not even using all of them. So another threat to bats in Madagascar is mining. Mining is also in caves a lot of times, right? And so that's where bats roost and obviously it disturbs them. There's some large scale mining, like with a lot of equipment and vehicles happening in Madagascar, but there's a lot of small scale, they call it artisanal mining, where people are just trying to survive really, and they're just getting whatever they can out of the earth, but they're often doing this in places where like right underneath where all those people are caves and depressions where bats roost, so they'll break through to them eventually and destroy them. But it's not really the biggest problem with mining in Madagascar. The biggest problem is a human rights issue. Like the study was done by The Guardian a couple of years ago and found that most of the miners in Madagascar are children under the age of 10. So that's really tough to think about. And, you know, it's a little hard for you to say, well, that's it. I'm boycotting nickel, cobalt, iron, titanium, and gold. I mean, they're not things that you just buy. They're compounds. Then you need to throw away your computer and your phone then, because those elements are in them. So there's not really a good way to solve this except by regulations in the country on child labor, right, and environmental regulations. Okay, and then the last threat here is just deforestation, forest clearing. So Madagascar, like the guy said in the short video, is under extreme pressure because essentially the population is growing and it's a small island, relatively small. It's a little smaller than Texas. So it's not really small, but there's nowhere to go. It's not like species or people can just migrate right across the border somewhere else. So as population grows, there's been a ton of forest clearing. And so you can see that originally Madagascar is a pretty dry place and it has a lot of savannas. So in this graphic, what you can see is like the original extent of the forest is this dark green. And all that light green is other ecosystems, a lot of open savanna ecosystems that have some trees in them but are grasslands. So you can see it's decreased a ton over time. And that is through slash and burn agriculture to create new farmlands, or also like once the land starts to regenerate, people will burn it to stimulate new grass growth. So the reason why that's dangerous for bats is because, like I mentioned, these species don't all roost in caves, right? They roost, many of the species roost in trees and use forests as their habitat, right? Even the ones that roost in caves. Okay, so what can we do? The two main things that you should think about, the two main tools are controls on hunting and protecting the roosts. So controls on hunting, there's not much to think about there. It's like, okay, you should have some kind of control on the hunting. But when you're looking at your workshop maps, you might think about there's some sites that are marked that have documented hunting happening at them. So you might decide that makes it a higher priority for protection, or you might decide it makes it a lower priority because you know what? People are always going to be hunting here. We're not going to be able to stop them. We might as well not protect this site. It's your decision. But roost protection should definitely be a priority. So here, I'm just showing you a couple pictures of roosts. So here's a roost, like I was saying, it's not a cave, it's like rock outcroppings outside. And then here's fruit bats roosting in a tree. They'll actually cover the whole tree. It's crazy. Like it'll be a tree full of bats. So here is this is the last slide here. And this is just showing you so here's your study area. It's northern Madagascar. And here's the map that will be in the workshop document. So pay attention now, because I'm going to walk you through how to read this map. It's not totally intuitive. You can figure it out by looking at it for a couple minutes. So this map is in your workshop, and it's explained a little more there. But this is the study area. It's northern Madagascar. The little yellow dots are villages. The dashed line, all the red lines are trails or roads. So what does that mean for you? It means access to these sites, right? So you might say a more remote site is less likely to be hunted, and a site really close to towns might be hunted more. The little U's, these little shapes here, like these little U's, those are roosts, bat roosts. And the 4-letter words there are like the names of the sites that they gave them in this study. It's kind of annoying the way they labeled them, actually. But so like the letters M-A-N-G over there, right here. That's just the name of the roost site that they found there. So then down here it's saying, like, what do the colors mean? Gray equals forests or wooded savanna. Forests and wooded savanna are these dark gray parts. White is savanna. Dark gray is water, so that's just like the ocean and some rivers. And I love this one. Burnt savanna is shadows. This terrible description. But I went back and read the original paper, and what it means is when you see white and there's gray spots in it, that's burnt savanna. So the savanna is the white, the gray is the forest, and all the little gray dots in the white are places where they've burned for agriculture. Okay, so let me stop sharing this with you and just show you the workshop for a second. So, where is it? Here it is. Okay, so this is the actual workshop document. So basically it's just, for the background, I'm just telling you, like, go look at the slides and watch this lecture if you're not here right now. But your job is to come up with a conservation plan that determines which sites are the most important and to justify your decision. So this data is from, like that map I just showed you, it's from a study by these 2 researchers, and what they did was they walked throughout this whole place, this whole area, following tips from people or just surveying transects and looking for bat roosts. And every time they found a roost, they marked its coordinates on the map. Those are the little U's. And then they marked what species they named it, some 4-letter name. And then they looked to see what bat species were in there. So by doing that, by revisiting those sites over time, they were able to see, like, to characterize those roosts, like where are they, what's near them, what bats are in them, what species, how many of each species. And so that's the data that you have to work with to decide what to protect. So one thing I don't love that this map, I guess they didn't have a colored map, but like one thing I don't love about this map is, but you just have to basically deal with, is that they mark things by numbers. So like the ocean, 1, rivers, 2, mangroves, 3, village with kapok trees, a place where where bats like to roost, 9. So here's one of those. So the only ones of those that really matter to you are just like, you can see where there's some threats. So like 13, forest clearing for charcoal production is happening here. And that's right on top of one of the roosts, right? So when you look at that roost, you might be saying, oh, this looks pretty high risk because there's forest clearing right there. Now, when you look at I'm not expecting you to read all these roost names just right off here. There's also this table. So this table shows you the names of the roost sites up at the top. And basically, it's like as if they went out in the field and this was their data sheet. So here's the roost names. And then like say they went to go visit roost MANG, that one that was right on the ocean. It's probably named for mangroves, right? Well, they found one bat species in there, species code 1. That's what they found. And then down here, it tells you probable threats to the site: shrimp aquaculture and mangrove destruction and bat hunting. So there's quite a bit going on at that site. Now, there's only one species found at that site, but what other information are you given in this table? Well, there's only that one species, but it is an endemic species right here, and its conservation status is vulnerable. So you need to go through each of these sites and say like, okay, what are important criteria for me? And I've listed some of the criteria you can consider up here, right? The steps in your workshop are basically look at and familiarize yourself with the 2 maps and that table. It has a lot of information. You're going to need to look at it for a couple minutes. And then you want to go through all those sites and say, what do I think are going to be the priority? I'm a conservation planner. Which sites am I going to prioritize? And here's some criteria you can consider. So bats that are endemic or endangered, how many bat species occur at the site, right? Like the one I just showed you just had 1, but like this one over here, at the end, these have 9 at each site. These ones here. So it'll take you a couple minutes to understand how to use that table, but it has all this information in it. It's the existing land protection. So map 2 shows you where the Ankaraana Special Reserve is. So is it already inside that special reserve? Maybe you don't need to protect it then. Local threats. So again, you can get the local threats from the map. Like you see this one here is Rolla is right by number 13, which says forest clearing. But that information is also repeated down here, like Rolla is in the table. And when you scroll down to the bottom, it says forest clearing, right? So just learn how to use the map and that table, which the table is a lot of data, right? And then think about which sites do I want to prioritize based on any subset of this criteria. You don't have to use all these criteria. You could say, look, I don't think this one's important, and here is why. So what you're being graded on is, so here you're going to make the list, and then in 2, you're going to explain how you establish the priorities. Which criteria did you consider important and why? And then you're going to narrow it down to like 5 top sites and rank them by number. Like this is the top one to protect, and this is why. And then there's just one last question for you down there to think about. So I think something interesting to do this workshop would be to do it on your own and then compare with group members or a friend to see if you came to the same conclusions or different ones. because like in previous workshops, it's been pretty obvious, right? Like the spider one, everyone in the class picked whatever, site 3, but it's not as obvious here. And there isn't like a one right answer either. It's more how you justify your choices, right? So let's see. So do you guys have any questions about it?
For the conservation status, what does NT stand for?
Oh, near threatened.
Oh, okay.
Shoot, did I not put that on there? I might add that to the bottom and upload it again.
Okay.
Because, yeah, those are vulnerable, least concern, near threatened. That's all that's on there.
Okay.
There's no endangered ones that they found, so. So yeah, actually not, because it's interesting, all of the ones that they found were vulnerable, and that's not even like, near threatened is the worst level, then vulnerable, then least concern. It's like they're just everywhere. I'll put that down at the bottom. I forgot to add that on. And those are the IUCN rankings. Remember the IUCN that we've been working with through the semester? That's their rankings.
Okay.
But yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I'll change that and re-upload it. Like you guys know, but other people might not find it.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Other questions?
It's posted as a PDF, so do we just copy and paste the questions?
Yeah, I can post it as a Word document too. The reason I posted it as PDF is because that table was really hard for me to format, and as soon as you start hitting return or something, it goes crazy. And I knew that people were gonna get it into a format where then they couldn't read the table. So I'm not gonna put it up in Word, I don't think, just copy paste it. Yeah. What else? Seems clear? Yeah? Liam, were you able to hear in the end?
Yeah, I could hear the whole time. I think it was just, I don't know why it was saying that.
Oh, okay, good. I'm glad. It just kept saying your audio wasn't connecting or something. I'm glad you could hear. Okay, well, if there's no questions, I guess go for it. Oh, hey, can I ask you guys something? I know registration is happening. It started on the 16th, but when do freshmen register? Like if you're a freshman this year, when do you register?
Yesterday and today.
Oh, okay. And so incoming freshmen register
Over the summer.
Okay.
They register when they have orientation after all of us have picked our classes already.
Oh, okay, because I'm teaching this freshman level class, one of the new WAYS classes, and I just saw that everyone's WAYS classes are totally empty, so I was confused about what was happening. That makes sense now. Okay, alrighty. Well, thank you guys. If you do have any other questions, just send me an email. I think this one should be more straightforward, but hopefully thought-provoking for you guys. And watch those 2 videos, they're fun. Okay. I'll see you guys later. Good luck.